So we're talking about Shakespeare?
Yeah, and also Shakespeare lives on film program.
Yes, good.
You were the ambassador.
I was.
And last year was quite busy for you, as far as I can see.
Well, I went to India and Russia and China.
Yeah.
And London. Yeah.
Yeah. How did it all go, actually?
Wow.
I'm asking because those countries are culturally very different. You know, the Shakespeare's.
You're right. Are you recording now?
Yeah.
It's perhaps not true in all countries that their national hero, their national writer, appeals to other countries. There are many examples where writers do appeal to everybody, but Shakespeare seems to be the number one. There's nowhere you go in the world where Shakespeare isn't known, studied, and enjoyed. And that just confirms what I suspect is that it's Shakespeare's humanity, his understanding of human nature, which appeals and confirms that human nature actually doesn't change, really. He writes about kings and queens. Well, not many of those these days, but there are presidents, aren't there? And dictators and people in power, prime ministers. And what he has to say about power remains relevant if you're interested in politics. But then if you're interested in people, then Shakespeare's observations about falling in love are... it's as if he wrote today, or yesterday, rather than 400 years ago. And that appeals right across the world. So it's rather reassuring, actually, that there can be one writer whose knowledge of the inner workings of human beings appeals to us all. It's a very good message to the world that we're all the same, really. So what the hell are we arguing about if we're all the same? You know?
Yeah. And how do you explain this talent, actually? I mean, he was a really good worker, as far as I know.
Well,
he was studying quite well.
You know, there are all sorts of disciplines, aren't there, to understand ourselves. Religion is about trying to understand how we fit into the world. Psychology and psychiatry, love, relationships, friendship. It's all about trying to relate the individual to society. And he has that talent multiplied by 1,000,000. Yeah. And this is what baffles me, but he expresses his awareness of human nature in the most glorious language. And it's very subtle, it's very imaginative, and it can't really be understood in translation, I suspect. I mean, when I do a play by Anton Chekhov, the Russian play, right, I'm always saying, is this actually what Chekhov wrote? I mean, and the translator may well say, I don't really know because I don't speak Russian. You don't speak Russian and you've translated it? How can that be? So I just feel very lucky that I was born speaking English and reading English. But that, you know, I would like to be able to read Dostoevsky in the original. I'd like to read Molière. I'd like to read the classics from all disciplines. But so, you know, Shakespeare's plots are second-hand, really. He stole them all. He pinched them all. He couldn't be bothered. I was talking to the English playwright Tom Stoppard the other day. He said the most difficult thing, he said, I find about writing is coming up with the plot. And that's why he's, like many good writers, has adapted other people's plays. And it's what goes in between the plot that they get interested in, the characters. I'm probably repeating myself now.
Please. Well, you were in the process of adapting Richard III to the screen as well. Well, what's the importance of that movie for your career and your understanding of Shakespeare?
Oh, wow. I think until I made that film, my main interest had always been from childhood on with the theatre, not the cinema. My family, my father and my mother, my sister, elder sister, we used to go to the theatre a lot. We didn't go to the pictures, the cinema. So when I began acting, I saw myself as a theatre actor rather than a film actor. Until I made this film, Richard III. And it is based, of course, on a theatre production that I'd been in for the National Theatre and in the UK and had toured around. We didn't come to Turkey, unfortunately. We went across Europe and to all over America and Australia and a few other places. But I thought this version of the play that we are doing, setting it in a modern time period, would appeal to a very, very wide audience, and I thought cinema would help to bring that about. So I collapsed, shrank the play's text for the film. And it was quite, I knew the play and the character so well, having played him hundreds and hundreds of times, that it was relatively easy to imagine it as a film and imagine what the camera could substitute and put in and contribute. And then I had to begin to think, oh, and how do I act for the camera? You know, I'm used to working in large theatres and so on. So it had a great effect on my interest in cinema. And we discovered that Richard III did indeed work as a film. The director, Richard Loncraine, knew nothing about Shakespeare, and I didn't know much about how to make a film, so we were a very good combination. And once the film came out, I was thought by critics and others to be a man of the cinema.
Yeah.
And I think if I hadn't made that, I wouldn't have then have caught the eye initially of Bryan Singer, who put me into a film of his called Apt Pupil, and then later the X-Men series as Magneto. And I think without Richard III, probably I wouldn't have been considered for Gandalf in Lord of the Rings, you know. So it was a milestone in my life and in my career.
So, Richard III was your favorite role, can we say that, in screen?
No, you can't.
What's your
No, my favorite part would be, because I take it very personally, would be James Whale in Gods and Monsters. James Whale was an English theatre director who became a film director and became the most highly paid film director in Hollywood in the 1930s. Mm-hmm. He invented the Frankenstein movies and The Invisible Man, mm-hmm. and other big popular successes, and he was openly gay, which made him very unusual. And the Gods and Monsters is about the last few weeks, if not days, of his life. Mm-hmm. But being a gay Englishman like him, and being a visitor to Hollywood like him, I felt, although my life is nothing like his, there were enough connections for me to feel at ease. And once I dyed my hair white, which I had to do in those days, I suddenly discovered I looked rather like him. So, and that was a big success. I mean, Bill Condon won the Oscar as a screenplay writer. I know I was good in it, and it was a labour of love where everyone involved thought it was important, because it was one of the first films, I think, really to allow a gay character to dominate the film, and his sexuality was irrelevant, really, to that dominance. He was just an interesting man. That being gay was part of that. So it was one of the first times that a gay person had been taken seriously and on his own merits. And although he dies at the end, as gay characters often used to do in films, they got what they deserved. We do all die, and I don't think that the film is condemnatory of gay people, and that it was a success, and I was nominated for an Oscar, and the film was well liked all over the world. That brought two sides of my life together in a very pleasing way.
Yeah. Well, the last question. Değil mi? It's a kind of conceptual question. As also one of the founders of Stonewall and an actor, how can you describe the relation between the stage and the street, and the fiction and the reality, and how you think the transformation in society is possible? Does the arts do any help?
My contribution to the gay rights movement is to bear witness, really, just to say, I am what I am, this is what it feels like to be me, and I'm a gay man, and make of that what you will. And I want everybody else in the world to have the freedom that I've been now allowed to have, to be myself. When I was a teenager, it was against the law to be gay in my country. That's not true of Turkey, of course. So that was very repressive and horrible and unnecessary and cruel. And to have been a victim of society's irrational disapproval. It can do any number of things to a person. It can repress them to such an extent that they kill themselves. Or, as in my case, rather late in the day, I got angry and said, I will not stand for this. And I've helped the gay rights movement in my country to improve the situation totally with regard to the law.
Yeah.
Or does film have, do actors, do playwrights, do novelists, do artists have anything to do with all that? Yes, I'm not much fond of art which is just political, as agitprop. Can be effective, can be necessary, I suppose. But it's more in the sense of the culture that I think it's not only appropriate or desirable, but it's almost mandatory that a film industry should not inhibit the telling of gay stories about the gay experience. It's not fair to omit that, say it doesn't exist. And gay writers, individual gay writers, their knowledge of themselves and expressed to the world, it's very important witness. And although it may not be the intent of the novel to change the political situation, the result may well be that it does do that. So it was thought by some people when I came out and said I was gay at age 49 that I would become a queer artist, that my career as it had been so far would stop and I would now engage only with gay material. And my response to that was no, I couldn't do that because I found the phenomenon of heterosexuality far too interesting to ignore. Could I no longer play Hamlet or Macbeth or King Lear? No. But it did mean that when I played Coriolanus, for instance, or looked at the play, The Merchant of Venice, that I would perhaps be more alert than most to the fact that both those plays have gay characters in them. Or there's a lot of homosexual love in the relationship between Coriolanus and Telesophidius, two parts that I've played. And the part I haven't played, Antonio, who is the Merchant of Venice, and who begins the play by saying, "In sooth, I know not why I am so sad." Well, we rapidly discover the reason for his sadness, which is that his boyfriend, Bassanio, has just said that he wants to get married to a woman, and he wants Antonio, his lover, to give him the money to do the wooing. Oh dear, what a situation. Not very funny. Not much of a comedy, that play, but in understanding that about that play, do you sense that Shakespeare is trying to change the world and people's attitudes to gay people? No, he's just saying this is the way the world is, and perhaps I think that's probably the best way to change the world, is to say, from my point of view, it looks like this. And then, whether it's a film or a novel or a play, the audience travels, meets people wouldn't otherwise come in contact with, is taken to places and experiences that otherwise they mightn't know anything about. People expand. Is that germane to what you were saying?
Yeah.
Yes. Of course, Shakespeare is like the weather. He's like the range of mountains. He exists. He's there, and you make of it what you will. You might like climbing the mountains. You might like staying down and looking up at the mountains. You might like to fly over the mountains. So there will be all sorts of productions of Shakespeare on stage and on screen and on radio.
Yeah.
And each will be different and can be different because the material is so natural, it's so present. And will exist, once you've done a really silly production of Shakespeare. I saw one recently, of Richard III, actually. It was visiting London. I thought it was misjudged and stupid and crude.
Yeah.
And not really Shakespeare at all. But I couldn't get angry. That was the way they saw it. And the text remains for the next production to come along and present something different. But everybody claims Shakespeare as their own. Don't they? When you do Coriolanus, is this a play in favour of fascism? Or communism? Or is it condemning communism and fascism? What is it? But it's neither. It's just showing you how it is. How it is. And there's too much of our life. And it can come from religion, it can come from bad education, it can come from bad politics, it can come from bad reporting, it can come from stupid conversations that obscure the world, limited. Say this is black and this is white. No, it's not. It can be, but the sun changes and black becomes grey, becomes white, becomes gold, becomes silver. And that's what Shakespeare understood. But it seems to me.